What's going on, Packers Nation? Welcome back to another video of Packers Latest. I am your host, Taylor Bretl, keeping you up to date on the latest news on the green and gold Green Bay Packers. A happy Thursday to all of you watching out there, and a huge shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video. If you want to sign up for Underdog, feel free to do so right up there. If you scan that QR code, you can win up to $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. Super Bowl just a couple of weeks away. You don't want to miss out on that. We got a packed show for us today, talking about the cornerback room in the first half and then some coaching news in the second half. So let's dive right into it. This is news as of a couple days ago, but did want to touch on it. Keisean Nixon has been added to the NFC Pro Bowl roster, which is definitely something interesting to look at. Nixon did get added because with the Seahawks going to the Super Bowl, Devon Witherspoon cannot play in the Pro Bowl games, so they had to find a replacement, and they went with Keisean Nixon. Don't know if a couple of guys were asked before him and declined, and that's how Nixon got a spot. But nonetheless, Keisean Nixon headed to the Pro Bowl not as a special teamer, not as a kick returner like times in the past, two-time All-Pro as a kick returner. This time he is there as a cornerback. I don't know your thoughts on this. Feel free to leave it in the comment section down below. I was definitely pretty stunned. But again, a lot of guys with the Pro Bowl, it's a lot of guys drop out, and then it's who's up next, who's up next. That's no disrespect to Keisean Nixon, but just kind of the season he had, didn't really feel like Pro Bowl would be attached to his name. But hey, he still made it nonetheless, and you got to give him props for that. This is per Ken Ingalls on X, kind of talking about Nixon and the season he had when talking about how he made the Pro Bowl, because I know a lot of people had question marks around that. And don't get me wrong, Keisean Nixon had to step into a CB1 role this year, a very, very high ask of a role, especially with the opponents that Green Bay played, and, a playoff game which did not work in their favor. But hey, Nixon had a pretty tough task going from kind of lower on the depth chart to now guys like Jair leave, and then you become the CB1 playing every single snap nearly. So big shoes to fill. Nixon had some really impressive moments, had some really bad moments that you want to forget. I think the word that I describe him as this season is inconsistent. I kind of just think that's the best way to put it. You look at the games against Chicago. The first game when they played them, he had the game-sealing interception. Then the second game they played them, he got burnt on that game-winning touchdown for Chicago. And then in the playoffs, I don't know if you saw that clip, a goal line carry by DeAndre Swift. There's kind of a famous clip on it, you can call it, where Keisean Nixon kind of jumps out of the way and Swift gets into the end zone. I don't know. Inconsistent's the way to go. Those are just 3 game examples. I wanted to go talk about the Bears games because those are obviously 3 very impactful games for the history of the rivalry and for how this season panned out. But again, per Ken Ingalls on X, he posted saying, Keisean Nixon is tied for the highest penalized player in the league. In parentheses, put 14 in 2025. 2 were declined, 1 was offsetting, 11 accepted, which is tied for the 3rd highest. So again, Keisean Nixon, definitely lots of penalty issues for him. The fact that 11 of those were accepted, that is tied again for the 3rd highest in the NFL. 4 of them pass interference, 3 illegal contact, 2 unnecessary roughness, 2 illegal use of hands, 1 offsides, 1 holding, 1 face mask. So a tough year for Keisean Nixon, but hey, even in the dark times with numbers like that, he still had his moments and he got into the Pro Bowl games. So you got to clap it up. You got to show him respect nonetheless. I mean, hey, he got there. I don't know which guys didn't accept for him to get there, but he got there. He was asked. Of course he's going to accept it. He is just one of 2 Packers Pro Bowlers this season. The other one, Micah Parsons, who obviously is out for the season. So Nixon is really the only guy that we may be able to see on the field during the Pro Bowl representing the Green Bay Packers. But this corner room is thin. Keisean Nixon's the cornerback 1 in a room where, I feel like the Packers need to add 1, maybe 2 more names. So let's take a look at some of the possible cornerbacks that the Packers could be looking at. So kind of just asking, what free agent cornerbacks should Green Bay target? Feel free to leave in the comments down below if you have any names off the top of your head. I'm going to go over a couple here. So there are going to be 67 UFA cornerbacks in 2026. So that is a lot of unrestricted free agents. Just one of those 67 is a Packer, which is Trevon Diggs. So you can really say 66 that the Packers would be looking at, because it's not likely that Diggs will be back, especially with that contract attached to him. My personal favorite candidate out of this list is Jamel Dean from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Kind of look into some of his stats this season, and I kind of looked at some articles written before. I know it's a little bit before the season or midway through the season. Dean kind of seems comfortably in the top 15 corners on these articles, some by ESPN, some by smaller outlets. Kind of, kind of hard to evaluate a corner. I feel like you can have a really strong top five. You know, you got Pat Surtain leading the group, in my personal opinion. Then when you go away from there, kind of guys mix and matching when you look at different lists. But Dean, a very strong cornerback overall. He played in 14 games this season, had 3 interceptions. One of them was a pick 6. He forced 2 fumbles as well. So Dean, a very aggressive player. 3 interceptions, that's pretty good. Returning one for a touchdown, that's even better. And then 2 forced fumbles. Another thing I note about Dean is his size. You look at the Packers' current corners, starting off with Keisean Nixon. He's just 5'10" and 200 pounds. You got Valentine, 6 feet flat, 189 pounds. Nate Hobbs, also 6 feet flat, 195 pounds. Look at Dean. He's taller, 6'1" and 206. So a bigger corner, despite being very similar in speed to these guys, quickness, agility. He is bigger as well. You know, a big reason why you're able to do things like force 2 fumbles. So my personal opinion, Jamel Dean is my favorite candidate. Will the Bucs try to bring him back? Maybe, but I think the Packers have to be aggressive. We saw this defense, collapse in that fourth quarter against the Chicago Bears. I know that there's a lot of things that needed to be fixed, but the corner room seemed to be the bleeding thumb out of what wouldn't work on that Packers defense. There's a lot of names on this list, though. Like I said, 66 guys that were not Packers this season that are UFA cornerbacks on this list. Another name, speaking of Packers, could they get a reunion? Rasul Douglas, he is one of those names as well. I mean, Miami's taken many aspects of the Green Bay Packers. How about the Packers take someone from the Dolphins? I know he's a free agent, so he's technically not with the Dolphins anymore, but could Rasul Douglas, possibly be looking for a reunion with the Packers, or the Packers looking for a reunion with Rasul Douglas, rather, I should say. The one thing to note about Douglas, though, he is a little bit older compared to the couple names that I'm going to be listing. Douglas is 30, but we saw what he did in Green Bay. I mean, a heck of a story from him. Came off, I believe, the Cardinals practice squad, and then his first game he played with the Packers, got that game-winning interception against the Cardinals. I mean, a pretty incredible story. Debuted in 2017, so he got that Super Bowl with the Eagles. So again, he's been in the league for 9 seasons. He is 30 years old, a little bit older, but hey, it's a veteran cornerback at that age, and he's been with Green Bay. He knows the system. I know you're going to have different defensive coordinator, lots of things different about that, but wouldn't be too upset if Douglas came back to represent the green and gold. Another name I got on this list, could the Packers be looking at someone that's currently in the Super Bowl? Well, Tariq, or he goes by Reek, I believe, Reek Woolen. That's another name that could be interesting for Green Bay. He's a big name, but what we saw in the NFC Championship game, not sure how many of you guys tuned into that. He had some pretty low moments in that game despite Seattle coming away with the win. Specifically on one drive, I believe it was in the third quarter, late in the third quarter. He got a taunting penalty and allowed a touchdown on the same drive. And then on the bench, there was kind of a shot of him kind of going back and forth with teammates. Woolen kind of tweeted out about this, saying like, hey, we're just brothers. Like, we kind of wanted to win kind of a thing. I forget it word for word, saying it wasn't arguing. It was more like we're brothers. We kind of just had to talk it out. Something like that. Nonetheless, gave up a touchdown on the same drive where he got a taunting penalty. Not a pretty sight, but again, Woolen, one of those guys, when you look at lists before the season, made midway through the season, they put him as around a top 20 corner in the league. Obviously, Witherspoon is the CB1 in that unit, but Woolen, one of the better rookie seasons for a corner over recent history. He's kind of faded away since then, but I think still a strong option for Green Bay. No disrespect to the corner room right now, but it is very, very thin. Not really too many big names there that a guy like Woolen could easily take that CB1 spot. Again, these are just big hypotheticals. It's only, late January. The Super Bowl hasn't even happened. Woolen is still on a team, and he's looking to raise that Lombardi trophy. But that's another name that I had. So feel free to leave a name that you guys want the Packers to look at. Again, there's 66 of them, so I've only named 3. I can go through this whole list, but that would probably be a pretty long episode, and I don't know if you'd want to sit through that. But before we get into the coaches talk, got to give a huge shout out, as always, to our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Football's biggest game is right around the corner, and you can get in on all the action on Underdog. Not on Underdog yet? Then you're in luck, because new customers score $75 in fantasy bonus entries when you make your first $5 fantasy entry. Playing on Underdog is easy. Just head to the app, make picks on if a player will go higher or lower on stats like touchdowns, rushing yards, receptions, and more. If you get them right, you can win up to 5,000 times your cash. Plus, there's a new promo dropping daily in the app. So if you like making picks and winning money, then Underdog is the place to be for the big game. Speaking on the big game this week on Underdog, I guess you could say a little bit more next week because we are talking about the Super Bowl. I'm looking around at Sam Darnold. That's the guy that I am turning my attention to for these picks. Let's take a look into the numbers right here. I have 5 picks on Darnold for this week. Last week, I almost went 5 for 5. I did pick a lower on Matthew Stafford, which was the one I got wrong. I'm going at it again with Sam Darnold with 4 higher and 1 lower. The lower on his rushing yards, but let's take this top to bottom. Sam Darnold, I mean, his first Super Bowl as a starter. He's been in the Super Bowl before. That's with the 49ers as a backup. So, his first time on a true biggest stage that you can get to in the NFL. I got higher than his 229.5 passing yards. Kind of, I shouldn't say inconsistent, but 2 totally different games that he's played in the playoffs so far. He's played 2 games in the playoffs, both against division opponents. The first one against the San Francisco 49ers, he only needed to throw the ball 17 total times. He had just 12 completions for 124 yards and a touchdown, but that's a game where they won 41-6, so he did not really need to throw the ball. Then you go in the game against the Rams, and that is where he really needed to throw the ball to get them to win, which is exactly what he did. He was 25 of 36 there with 346 yards, completion percentage at 69.4%. He had 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. So 2 totally different games from Darnold, to say the least, but I got higher than 229.5 passing yards. I don't know if he'll reach as much as 346 like he did against the Rams because his Patriots defense is pretty good, but I got Darnold going higher than that. And with higher in the yards, I got higher in the touchdowns. Again, just 1 against San Francisco, but he didn't really need to do much. But this is the Super Bowl. I feel like the pressure's high. They're going to really need to put the team on his back. He had 3 in that win against the Rams, so I'm going higher than 1.5. You go to the rushing yards, that is where I have lower. I mean, Sam Darnold, not really a runner. He kind of seems to be higher than 5.5 one game, lower than 5.5 another. Kind of a flip-flop, coin flip type of a pick. I'm going to go lower, so I don't pick all hires, but I made that mistake last week, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. But nonetheless, I am going to go lower. But hey, who knows if he'll have a big run that could seal the Super Bowl. We saw Drake May have a big run that sealed their trip to the Super Bowl themselves. Who knows? I'm going to go lower. Now we go on completions. 19.5 is what it's set at. I got higher than that. Again, just 12 completions against San Francisco, but a game against Los Angeles where he had to throw a lot more, he had 25, so it would crush that line of 19.5. I am going to go higher. And then you go to the total pass attempts. I mean, I know you got Kenneth Walker, but you know the running back room is thin. It's really just Walker back there, and that's a big reason with Charbonnet going down why Darnold threw so much. Also because it was successful, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's another way to put it. But I am going to go higher than 29.5 passing attempts. He had 36 in that game against the Rams. But hey, feel free to leave your picks down below. I'm curious what you guys are looking at for this game. Would be neat to see Sam Darnold win a Super Bowl. Also curious who you guys are rooting for the Super Bowl. I'm kind of torn. I kind of don't have a preference. I don't really want to see the Patriots get another ring. I mean, they had to take a dreadful 6-year break to be back on this big stage. But the Seahawks have given Packers some pretty rough losses that we just can never forget as much as we want to. So kind of torn on who I want on this, but I think it'd be a pretty cool story for Sam Darnold nonetheless. But again, feel free to sign up for Underdog. Make picks, win money.
Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/play and get terms DFSTML for details. Offer not valid in Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In New York, call the 24/7 helpline at 1-878 or text HOMI 467-369.
I welcome you back to Packers Latest. Now we're going to be talking about this coaching cycle, I guess you could call it, just coaching moves, you could say in general. The Packers got the big signing in Jonathan Gannon. They filled that defensive coordinator role. But hey, there's a defensive coordinator or a former defensive coordinator that is joining the Green Bay Packers. The Packers hired former Bills defensive coordinator Bobby Babich, and I think that this is a very big hire. He will become their defensive pass game coordinator slash secondary coordinator. So I think that this is huge. Buffalo Bills, every single year, basically, it feels like they're in the playoffs. Pretty strong defense, I will say. I'll get into the numbers. The defense this playoff run, not too strong, but he is going from a DC role with a contending team in the Buffalo Bills to a role with the Green Bay Packers as their defensive pass game coordinator. So I think that this is huge. There's a couple tweets on this. I'll start with this one per Rob Domofsky on X saying, the Packers are hiring Bobby Babich, the former Bills DC. Source said he's replacing Ryan Downard, and he will have defensive pass game coordinator title. Sorry, kind of a tongue twister there is how I read that. He also followed it up saying Matt LaFleur interviewed Babich for the Packers DC job the last time before hiring Hafley. So again, we've seen this with a couple candidates. Now this is a true hire for the Packers, but we've seen a lot of names that LaFleur has talked to despite going with someone else. This is another example, so it's really neat that he's on the staff. He knows LaFleur to some extent. I know LaFleur chose someone over him, but it's neat that he has an opportunity. You look at the Bills' defensive numbers this season, their 293.1 yards allowed per game was the 7th best in the NFL, and their 156.9 passing yards allowed per game was 1st in the NFL. So again, Babich is here to really work on the pass game portion of the defense, and he allowed just 156.9 passing yards allowed per game when he was the DC for the Buffalo Bills, the best in the NFL. I think this is what you have to circle out of this. And the 293.1 yards allowed per game in general, 7th in the NFL, that is also very strong. You go to the interceptions, the Packers had just 7 this season. The Jets had 0, and I think there's 3 teams that had 6. Then the Packers had 7. So very, very low on the list among teams in the NFL with interceptions. The Bills, 13. So this guy clearly knows how to coach a secondary. I think this is a phenomenal hire for the Green Bay Packers. There is one thing, though. There's always one thing with every hire. You've got to look at all sides of it. Even when you get excited, even when there's so many positives, postseason, this playoff run, not the prettiest. You go to these numbers here. 354 yards allowed per game, 242 passing yards allowed per game, and they're 28.5 points allowed per game, which came in 24 against Jacksonville and 33 against Denver. That is not too pretty. But again, I can't really make an excuse saying it's the playoffs and you're playing better teams, so the numbers would be inflated. The playoffs is where you need to do it the most. And we've seen that with the Buffalo Bills. I mean, McDermott got fired. Them in the playoffs, just not a recipe for success. Unfortunately, that's just how it's been. But I do just love these numbers, especially in the secondary for Babich. And this is why I talk about the corners earlier in the episode. The Packers should go and get a corner or two to give Babich even more help in that secondary, in that pass game that he is going to help coach. So I'm excited for the hire. Feel free to leave a comment if you're excited for it as well. I think it's a home run hire. I mean, you got the defensive coordinator of a Super Bowl contending team on your staff. Even if the Bills, I mean, these guys are splitting left and right from the Bills organization. It is messy over there. So hopefully Green Bay takes him in with open arms and kind of gives him a more relaxed job, a less chaotic job, and a very successful tenure with Green Bay. But that takes me into the last point of this episode, talking about Sean Duggan, and he joins Jeff Hafley in Miami. Another Green Bay Packer going to Miami. I touched on this when I just mentioned Rasul Douglas. Could we steal one back? Sean Duggan, he is out of Green Bay, and he is with the Miami Dolphins. I did mention this a couple episodes ago, kind of like, would he be gone? And now it's official. Per Rob Domofsky on X says, LaFleur and Jonathan Gannon still need a linebackers coach to replace Sean Duggan, who also joined Hafley in Miami. So the Packers, they're locking down these coaching positions. They got Gannon, they got Babich, but now your linebackers coaching position is wide open, and you're going to need to find someone to replace Duggan. I'll make sure to touch on that in the next episode, maybe look at some candidates, really dive deep into it, because not too many names out there right now, as this is very new news with Duggan leaving, but it was kind of expected with Hafley going to Miami. But that's all I got for this episode of Packers Latest. I appreciate you all tuning in as always. Definitely lots of news surrounding the green and gold. Even though it's the off season, it never stops. I appreciate you tuning in as always, and go Pack Go.